Welcome to the fourth Global Mental Health Speakout podcast, in which we will be discussing mental health in the family. I am Yael Gaia from Israel, joined today by Carly Montague Cardozo from UK, Julian Collin from Ireland, and Jivilia Valdutskiene from Lithuania. The experience that we all have of our families is so influential and unique to us, and so are our mental health journeys. That's why the two are very likely to be entangled. Today we will be discussing the bi-directional relationships between mental health and families from different perspectives. Specifically, being a parent with a mental health condition, having a parent with a mental health condition, and mental health condition in the wider family, for instance, non-parental role models. I would like to focus initially on mental health as a parent. I will invite Carly to tell us about her experience. Hello, Carly. I am curious to hear from you. How do you feel your mental health affects your perspective as a parent?
I think there are many ways in which my mental health has shaped my perspective as a parent, and I think a lot of those are actually based on my own assumptions and my internalized stigma. Not all of it, because there is always going to be an element of external influence, but I do recognize that for me personally, a lot of the worry and the judgment and the anxiety I have about being a mother comes very much from within. I think the first thing that I became aware of when I knew I was going to be a parent was quite a sudden shift in how open I was with the people around me about my mental health. So previously, I was relatively open with the people around me. However, I noticed that very much shut down quite dramatically when I was pregnant. And now, it's only starting to build up again almost 7 years later. Why? I think simply because I didn't want people to think I was unable to take care of a child. And it doesn't matter how often I got reassurance from various people, it made no difference to me. It felt almost like a reflex to conceal things. I know now, in retrospect, that probably wasn't wise, but it's what I found myself doing. And I've learned over the years not to beat myself up about how I behave or how I think, because that's an extra pressure that I and the people around me just don't need. And I think or hope that I'm learning that there are very good reasons behind these choices. And so I see them now as learning opportunities and important lessons about me. Another thing that I've become aware of, especially in recent years, is my tendency to not speak very openly about my daughter. One reason is that, obviously she's not given permission for me to do that. She can't, she's only 6, and so she's too young to understand exactly what that means to be spoken about publicly and the potential implications. And I think many parents share that perspective. But there's also an element, I have this idea in my head that people will put 2 and 2 together and think, oh, you're the one with the crazy mother, about my daughter. And with time, as she gets older, she'll understand that if someone holds that opinion, then they're very much the problem, not me and not her. But at this age, at the age she is now, words like that, she's not going to process them in that way. It's going to be a lot trickier to get her to think in that way. And so I think it could have a much more hurtful impact now. It would be hurtful as she's older, but I think she would have more defenses and more understanding to protect herself against that when she's older. So I find myself feeling very protective of her, not only in the way that most parents feel protective about their children, but also protective over her association with me for her sake. And I'm aware that this tendency I have is currently and luckily unfounded. it's again due to my internalized stigma. And so overall, I'd say my perspective as a parent is a cautious one and is a pressured one. These words, I assume, they echo the perspectives of all parents. So in this respect, I'm no different. It's just that I arrive at that perspective through a different route. But then, isn't that everyone anyway? So yeah, that would be my perspective as a parent in a nutshell.
Yeah, wow. Thank you, Carly. I will ask you a second question if it is okay for you. Do you think you use your mental health experiences to shape how you parent?
Um, yes, I do. I think although I find myself by nature focusing on what I would consider to be hurdles and downsides, because I can be quite a negative person. For instance, I have a tendency to feel a lot of guilt if I'm not my best self with her. But this guilt's so universal, regardless of circumstances. I think what's been useful for me and helped my mental health is that I've also recently recognised the more positive aspects of bringing my mental health experience to the way in which I parent, especially now as my daughter is growing up and she's developing and she's navigating her own life and her own relationships. I think as a mum, I've got a lot of understanding and empathy. How much of this is due to my specific experiences and just me as a person or me as a parent in general? It's not possible to say. I could speculate, but I couldn't say for sure. But what I would say is that I'm comfortable and confident with the level of both empathy and understanding that I have. I very regularly try to put myself in her shoes by listening to her, watching her, remembering my own experiences, and kind of using all that to ensure that I'm holding a safe space for her to share anything that she wants to share. I'm always kind of on high alert for that necessity for a safe space. And so far, I think based on the way she does share with me and how frequently and comfortable she shares it, I think I've done well in creating that space for her. I'm not saying that, to be a supportive or understanding parent, you need to identify as having a mental health condition or mental health experience. What I'm saying is that my mental health does not prevent me from supporting my daughter in all the ways that she needs. And it serves as a constant reminder for me to be cautious about how I'm coming across to her and identifying what she needs. And also, learning what she does need. And that includes, seeing me practice self-care and share how I'm feeling in a healthy way. That's something that I've really had to make an active effort to do. In that respect, she's helped me. And I've had to be quite active with that because self-care and setting boundaries, they're not things that come easily to me at all. They're something I really struggle with. I always have. I'm a people pleaser. I fear judgment. I'm a perfectionist. So saying no to things, taking care of me, I don't do that very well at all. I'm not good at listening to my mind or body when I need to take a break. I often choose to ignore both of them. And then I very quickly saw how this had an impact on my daughter. She would be, for instance, a lot more irritable when I was tense, or I noticed I would be a lot less present and miss things. And again, this is a position that all parents will find themselves in from time to time because everyone's busy juggling work, childcare, we all have bad days. But having my daughter now at this age where she is watching, she's picking up everything, she's trying to emulate me, I'm much more aware of not only when I need to take my foot off the pedal, but why I need to. And I do try my best to explain, why I'm resting, why I'm taking that time out. So being, in this case, in our family, I'm her main role model. And that's definitely helped me go down the route of fake it to make it. As I said, I'm terrible at doing things for myself. I'm very much a do as I say, not as I do type of person. But I've recognized now the importance of doing and the importance of modeling those healthy behaviors for her. And that's been the nudge that I've needed to do it genuinely for myself. And I'm still learning. I have good and bad days, but having my daughter there as motivation, that constant reminder to look after myself is amazing. And it's something that's been very unexpected.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Carly.
So let's continue our podcast. It's me, Jibile, taking over. So Carly and Yil explored how our own mental health impacts the way we parent and how we view ourselves as parents. But there is another side of the story that's often overlooked. What effects parents' mental health has on their children, both growing up and as adults. So today we're diving deeper into the experiences of those who grew up being aware of their parents' mental health struggles, or perhaps only recognized it later in life. How does that awareness shape who they are today? And how do the attitudes and behaviors of parents or families impact the way the children later approach their own mental health and help seeking? I'm excited to hear from Julianne, who will share her insights. Let's address a couple of questions. First, looking back, Julianne, how did the issues with your parents' mental health impacted you both growing up and in adulthood?
So there's a couple of perspectives here. So I would have experienced my mom's mental health when I was growing up from a very young age, from about 6 or 7, and then I would have just recently experienced my dad with chronic psychosis, which then led into dementia. So I'm going to kind of talk about my two perspectives. Starting off with my mom. So when I grew up, I had to grow up very, very fast. So I was not, my mom's mental health wasn't hidden from me. I was kind of brought along with the experience. So she would have had chronic physical disease difficulties, which would have led to her being in a wheelchair. So I would have been kind of in the role of carer anyway. So my first memories would have been being in like primary school education and thinking I need to stay at home to mind mom because she doesn't like she doesn't like being in bright areas. So I didn't know what depression was at that time, but all I knew was that it was my role to make her happy, and it was my job to keep her functioning and helping her with everything that she needed to do. So if that was washing clothes or doing things around the house. So I fell face first really into the role of being a carer. So I would have been, and my mom, unbeknownst to herself obviously, would have really leaned into this because she wouldn't have known any better. So it was she kind of allowed me to be her carer and for me to mind her and me to take the responsibility and the weight of managing her mental health. She would have taken medication. She would have not really engaged in psychiatric services because that was seen as too big of an issue. It was too big of a problem. So the role of me being a carer led to me being identified as a person in this role. So people would have always asked, how's your mom? How oh you're so strong, and oh you're such a good girl. And so all of this praise, all of this validation, all of this acknowledgement came from looking after and minding, and I loved it. Like me and my mom were best friends. We went everywhere together. When she was happy, it was brilliant. When she was sad, you had to be sad. When she was angry, you had to be angry. You couldn't really have different emotions. But what it led to was I was invisible. So I was kind of left I was a wallflower. I couldn't have my own feelings. If I did have my own feelings, it would kind of be like, what are you talking about? And sure, look, everything is fine now. Or if mom was happy, I had to be happy. If I was sad, there'd be obviously something going on. Puberty was a nightmare because I just could not regulate my emotions. But what I had to self-soothe, and I had to figure out how to mind myself, because mom did not do self-care at all. Everybody was so busy praising her because of the difficulties that she was overcoming. And then I was the best person in the world because I was looking after her. So we all thought everything was great, but my poor mental health was completely left in the dust. So what it did was, seeing then, if we fast forward, all of this time, or 30 years or whatever, I then had to separate my being a carer role and me as a person. So looking after dad meant that I was able to advocate, support, and ensure the team were doing all the work, because everybody for my whole life with looking after mom, like, I had to fight and advocate for her. They were like, oh Jesus, she's a great girl now. She has all of this sorted. So we don't need to do the work here. She's got it done. So I was able to hand over the responsibility to the people, the adults that were actually there to do the job. So it really provided me with a lot of resilience, and it is I'm trying to still figure out. It's only about a year or so ago that I figured out, oh, actually this isn't a strength. this is actually quite different of a characteristic that I have, that everyone's like, oh sure, aren't you great? So I try now to have my identity as myself, and not, so now people will say, how are you, instead of how's your mom or how's your dad.
Thank you, Julian. That is very sensitive experience that you had, and obviously you were in need of support and help at that time. So consequently, the second question I have is, how did your parents or your family's attitudes towards mental health conditions influenced you and your approach to seeking help?
So it was quite interesting because there was quite a lot of mental health in the family, and it was because there was so much chaos. So like my mom had a serious attempt to end her life, and she ended up in hospital. And I remember getting collected from school, and my aunt collected me, wouldn't tell me what was going on. I didn't have a clue. And then I got home to my grandma, and my grandma said, now don't cry, but your mom is after trying to take her life. And I obviously bawled my eyes out. But it was just so interesting, because I think I was only about 15 at the time. So there was a very different attitude. It was like, but sure, it's not extreme, or but oh sure, she's not dead, or like, oh, like, if your feelings, oh, but they're not like, oh, like, if you're not going to be at a very high risk, sure, what are you worried about? So it was kind of measured in chaos, as opposed, like, as a late intervention, as opposed to let's get in there early and nip this in the bud to be able to manage it. So what it did was, it kind of, because I was in this caring role already, I always felt the need to have to manage and mind everyone first. But what that led to was a delayed trauma response in me. but everybody else was fine, because this would have been a period of maybe 6 months or a year. Everyone's fine and everyone's moving on, and then I've crumpled and I'm having panic attacks and all of this, and people are like, what is wrong with you? So I'd be like, oh, I need help. And then people, because I was so strong and I was so resilient and I was able to, I had developed my own skills. So I knew what I had to do. People were like, oh, but you're fine. You are doing all these things. You're great. And I was like, so I'd have to like actually fight and advocate for myself. I remember I actually went behind my mom's back and I went to my principal in school and I said, I need to speak to someone, because the incident that happened, there was so much time had passed. My mom was like, oh, but sure, that was ages ago, you're fine. So what it's done is everybody else's attitudes has, while in the moment I was basically, I had to keep quiet, I had to kind of keep the peace, I was the glue that kept everyone going. And a lot of the time I was firefighting, and I was like, okay, I can look after myself when this settles down, or I know that when I am feeling better, I can do this or that. But what it's actually led me to, growing up, I lost a lot of time that that would have been different if I was supported. But now I kind of feel like I am my own kind of best friend, in a sense that I'm like, okay, other people have all these things, but what I've learned is, okay, I actually matter in this, and I don't care what people say. So people might be like a recent example, I was getting an assessment for ADHD, which I'm now treated for. But people were like, no, you don't have it, you're fine. What are you talking about? You're not bouncing off the walls. And now I just ignore everyone, because I'm like, well, no, because this is what I want. And I'm actually going to get help and support, because I think this is going to actually help me in my life to actually flourish. So it has helped me actually do the opposite, because I was so quiet for so long. And now I'm like, no, I'm going to seek help in my own way. So their negative attitude has made me just go the complete opposite way.
Thank you, Julianne, for sharing your incredible survival story. To move on in our discussion, I hand the moderator's wheel back to Yale.
Okay, so we will go on to our third topic. We have heard about how mental health can affect the relationship between parents and their children. But we know, of course, that families come in all shapes and sizes. And many of us find ourselves influenced by figures that are not our parents and may not always be caregivers. Our siblings also play key roles in shaping us. So, Julianne, according to your experience, what impact did having a sibling with mental health difficulties have on your mental health?
So, my brother had a depressive episode when I was 13, and this involved multiple serious attempts on his life that I happened to witness, in a sense that it happened to be that I was there to be able to provide support, medical attention, etc. One of the times the hospital said that 100% he would have died if I hadn't have been there. But what happened as a result of this was that everyone called me, and him involved, me involved, called me his guardian angel, and that I was his angel on earth, and I was there to protect him and keep him safe, and etc. So if we kind of carry on what we already know, that I was already the carer for mom, I jumped right into this role, pulled my sleeves up, ready to go. But what this did was put a huge amount of pressure on my shoulders, because I had to basically make sure this person stayed alive. And he may not have wanted to do that, but I was trying to manage and control someone that I didn't, as we don't. I have no idea what he's thinking, no idea what he's feeling. I might be on extraordinarily high alert while he could be flourishing, feeling absolutely marvelous. So what it did to my mental health was it actually threw me probably a decade ahead to pressures that I was never like some people would never be exposed to, but I had a pressure and responsibility that my poor little brain could not deal with. And what it did was it kind of put me I was very dysregulated a lot of the time, and it kind of led me with PTSD and flashbacks and all of these different things. So I'm kind of being a parent to my sibling, and I'm in a role, so I kind of lose my role of being able to be a little sister, and everyone else is kind of no one knows what to do, and everyone's just trying to keep everyone safe, and it led to a very different dynamic, which never actually really progressed, because as a result of this, I actually went into psychiatric nursing, because I was like, I never want any family to have to feel what we went through. And so it led me to go into actually working with adolescents as well. So then I was always going to be that kind of caring professional head. So then when my brother was feeling anyway, I'd know. So then we actually don't even talk anymore, which it's a decision that he has made, and that's absolutely fine. But I would have not talked to him probably about 8 years earlier, but only because I still had that connection of, I need to keep him safe. So that was my experience.
Thank you, Julian. That's a brave story. Thank you for sharing it with us. It's very precious. I will ask now, Carly, in your opinion, what impact does the wider family unit have on mental health?
Firstly, I just want to thank Julianne for bravely sharing what she has. It's always so important to hear these experiences such as hers. What's interesting for me is I find, although I can relate to a lot of what she said from my own personal experience, I actually find it more emotional thinking of my daughter experiencing these. I think because I want to be able to protect her, and I care more about my daughter than I do about myself. But I'm reminded that I can't properly look after her unless I look after me. So thank you, Julianne, for being so candid. And I want to just quickly pick up on something you said in a previous question, that I am my best friend. And I think that's such a breakthrough moment when we actually believe that. We can say it to ourselves because we're told to, but actually believing that, I think, is the moment that you start to look after yourself. So back to the question about the wider family, I give a probably more general answer here. We all know, as Yao said, that families are all shapes and sizes. So coming first of all from a parent perspective, because that's where my head goes to, it would be inaccurate to think that parents are always the most influential figures and always the main caregivers. This of course is not always the case. So other members of the family will directly impact the well-being of children. But I think what I'd like to point out and touch on in the limited time that we have today is it's not just about the presence of other family members and what they do. I think the mental health, not just of children, but of anyone, can be affected by the absence of family members and what they don't do. This is something like children, for instance, will pick up on as they mature, as they compare their situations and family dynamics to those of their friends. They'll passively pick it up, but they'll also actively notice how their parents or main caregivers or siblings navigate tricky family situations. They'll start to question things. Why do you argue with this person? Or how comes we never see that person? Especially at important family events, for instance. So how we deal with that, not just as parents, but as family members, can be very important because we're being watched for how we handle difficult situations in the family and how we manage any of the resulting struggles. But we're also being watched for how we judge others, how we talk about situations, and how we protect our own peace and establish our boundaries. And even just taking children out of the equation completely, it's also important for our own mental health to recognise where our boundaries are within our own family circumstances. And that's something I know Julianne just touched upon. Setting boundaries with anyone is difficult, but with family, it can feel a whole lot harder. There's a whole other level of expectation, duty, and I know the magnitude of this kind of varies between different families quite dramatically. But for me personally, I just find it really disappointing that it does feel a whole lot harder to set boundaries within families, because families should be the ones that understand. And I think it's even more important to set boundaries within the family if we need to, because we don't choose family. We can't choose who our family are. Yes, we can recognise some people, some friends as our family. I have friends I see as family, but the family that we may not necessarily have chosen, they're still in our lives. Whether they're there or not physically, they're still having an impact on our lives in some form. So we have to recognise which choices are best for us and for them. And I think sometimes we need to set boundaries to protect ourselves and our own well-being. But sometimes we also need to set boundaries to protect relationships. I've always been along the train of thought that actually it's okay if you need to see certain people less in order to get on with them. Why would anyone want to force a relationship into tension or conflict when we've all got enough to deal with? I've learnt the hard way that families in particular don't always understand that. And you can't always be in a position in which you can get everyone onto the same page. There can be a lot of resentment and a lot of tension when you do try to set those boundaries, and sometimes you cave and you can't set them, and sometimes you have to resist. But I think as we get older, we learn that sometimes we just have to accept that not everyone will understand our choices and our boundaries, but it's important to have faith in what you're doing for yourself. And Joe, I think it's fine to be a little bit selfish because I think the right amount of selfish can make us better people. I actually don't view being selfish as a bad thing if it means taking care of our well-being so that we're the best we can be for ourselves and for others. I mean, I'm not there yet, but it's a goal that I have, and it's a goal I'm keeping and working towards, and it's a good goal I have, in my opinion. And I think it's a very important goal to maintain when we're trying to look after our well-being, especially within the family, because not everyone's lucky to have such supportive, solid family dynamics. And so we do have to recognise when we have to act on that and try our best not to feel guilty.
So thank you very much, Carly, Julianne, and Yale for joining us today on the Global Mental Health Peer Network Speakout podcast. In this episode, we explored the complex connection between mental health and family dynamics. The conversations we had today with Carly and Julian highlighted how family experiences shape our mental health and how mental health in return influences family relationships. It is clear that mental health in families isn't just about the parent-child interaction. It extends to the broader family and social network, which is connected with those around us. So I want to thank you all, the speakers, for your valuable insights and personal perspectives, as well as our listeners for being a part of this meaningful conversation. And remember, mental health is a family matter. By sharing our stories, we can help to create a more supportive environment for everyone. So we'll be back next time with more discussions about mental health and its importance in our lives. Until then, take care and be kind to yourselves and those around you.